Hey guys, welcome back to the next episode of this Trance Takeover here on Sonic Academy. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the mid bass. In last episode, we looked at the sub and the kick and how to get them sitting nicely together. And realistically, the mid bass, or at least in theory, should be quite easy to do. A lot of the time, with producers that I've worked with or that I've helped Intuition, a lot of them sometimes say that they find it really hard to get their mid bass sounding right and punching through in a mix. And honestly, a lot of this is to do with the kick and bass, or the kick and the sub, not fitting together and not having the kind of punchiness and the warmth of the kick that we looked at, and also the kind of definition and the weight that we looked at on the sub. The fact that we've got those two bits kind of pretty much down perfect already, the mid bass should just kind of sit above that in terms of the frequency spectrum. So I've got this all set up so not to waste any time, and I've got my 4 different kind of bass lines playing. So pretty much with uplifting trance, we have this kind of 16th note sounding bass line, and traditionally it might just be your 3 kind of 16th notes kind of rolling together. I quite like that, but I kind of find it a bit boring. A lot of the time it's hard to get a decent amount of texture or kind of movement into it. So what I like to do to kind of compensate this is to have other bass lines playing different kind of MIDI patterns. So we've got our first one, our third bass line here playing the kind of rolling 16th notes. But on this first one, as you can see here, we've got these top notes, which, if I just put them down an octave, are your rolling 16th notes, and I've just popped them up an octave, and this is kind of going to help fill in those gaps with the different octaves, the different frequency range. And then we've done the same for the second bass line. It's playing the same kind of octave pattern. And then on this fourth one, we've got this kind of staggered sounding bass. So I'll just go through each individual one so you can hear what they sound like. So this is bass line 1. A real nice kind of metallic sound. And what we need to remember as we're going through these, we really need to make sure that when you're picking your bass lines, you're finding the best sounds possible. I like to start with the strongest sounds, and then that means I have to do less work. And you'll see how much little work it really takes in order to get your mid bass sounding nice within the mix. So that's bass line 1, bass line 2. So a nice kind of plucky one. And bass line 3, this is the rolling one. So nice high-end transients on that one there. And then bass 4, which is a staggered one. So that's that kind of thin, more kind of high-end bass line, kind of waspy sounding. So realistically, what we need to do is just some cuts and a little bit of a boosting, and that really is all we need to do for the individual bass lines. I've got them set up on the mixer channel here, and they're all routed to our bass bus, where we're going to go on and put some extra effects, but we'll do that afterwards. What I am going to do is I've got the sidechain or the ducking going on with LFO tool. If you want to know what preset this is, it's the one that opens up when you just load up LFO tool, but it's also just this one, sidechain 1, and then I've just moved this node to the left a little bit to avoid any kind of audio clipping. So let's go ahead and look at bassline 1. We're just going to load up the parametric EQ, and we're simply going to cut off the low end. We've already got our kick and our sub nicely crafted for that area down here from mostly 200 and below, 200 hertz and below. So now all we need to do is the bass lines just want to sit in this area above 200. So below is for the kick and the sub, above is for the bass lines. And we can hear that we've just taken off all of that nice low end. And then simply I'm just going to do a tiny boost in the high. And that is pretty much it. That's literally all I do with my bass lines. If I'm finding that I'm doing way more kind of EQ on it, then you might want to go back to the drawing board and find a different sounding bass. You shouldn't really have to do any sort of surgical stuff. You can do if they've got a lot of kind of resonant frequencies, but then maybe that's not the best one. In trance, you want these bass lines to be really strong, either soloed by themselves or then put together even better. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply just going to copy and paste that EQ to each individual bass line. Let's close these down. And then I'm just going to go through and make sure that the low end has been taken off enough. Let's put a little bit more mid bass back into that low end. So that's a nice way. If you found that you've taken off too much mid bass, or the kind of low end, I guess, you can add it back in the low mid. You need to decide whether you want to have that kind of weightiness behind it, or do you want the definition of just the high end. In this I want a little bit of both, so I've just added in some of that kind of weight back into it. And this one, not much low end on it already, so that's sounding good. So let's go ahead and then we'll get our kick and our sub playing, and then now it's just simply a case of getting the bass lines to the right volume. So let's start with bass line 1. Sounding a little bit overpowering at the moment. Now remember, when we were adding the bass lines in, the overall volume is going to be raising up, so I generally like to bring it down just slightly lower than what we think it should be, because as we add all 4 bass lines, the output of the bass bus is going to get higher. So that's sounding about right. Now let's add in bass 2. So let's bring that up in the mix a little bit, as it's sounding a bit quiet there. That sounded quite nice. They merged together quite nicely there. So as you can see, all I'm doing now is just simply controlling the kind of timbre and the sound of the bass line simply through volume. We've done our cuts and the tiny boost. Now we just want to do a little bit of kind of volume control. So that's getting there, and that one's quite overpowering, and there's kind of top end, that snappiness. So we pulled that down just a bit. And now the last one, which is the staggered bass line. I feel like that might be popping through the mix too much, so let's then just try and pull that down by 1 octave. That sounds a bit better. And let's open up the cutoff a little bit more. And extend the filter envelope on the sustain. Sounding a little bit nicer, a bit more width, kind of body to it. Let's put that back in. That's sounding a bit better now. So let's add it in with the kick and the sub. So it's sounding pretty good. Now let's maybe bring that sub down. So if you remember from last episode, I was talking about how it's a constant process of changing the EQ and the volumes throughout the mix. It's not just you get them right once and you leave it. You have to always remember that you have to change. As things are added into the mix, other parts of your track are going to become stronger or weaker. So we always have to kind of evolve with the track itself. So let's just pull down on the sub a little bit more. So that's starting to sound a little bit better. So we've got a bass delay on a send set up here, and so I'm just going to turn that on. We're going to use FL delay 3, which is fantastic. Now sends, always remember, I see so many people and continuously forget to do this. A send should always be 100% wet, no dry. We just want to hear the wet signal coming out of the send. If you're using a delay on a channel, then it needs to be 100% dry, and you can dial in your wet. If it's on the send channel or the auxiliary channel, it needs to be 100% wet. So we want to have it as a ping pong, a delay. We're going to send that out far left and right. It's set at a 4x sync at the moment on FL. Triplet, we can do it as a 16th. and let's add on a high pass filter. So right now it's set to all the way up, that'll be 0. So we want to slowly take out some of the low end. Now the reason I'm doing that is because there's still low mid in this baseline, and if you start adding a delay to the low mid, then that low mid is going to build and build and build, and because it's quite a strong frequency around the kind of 200 to 300 mark, it's going to build up and it's just going to make your mix a little bit muddy. So we want to use this cutoff to cut off some of the low end to make sure that it doesn't conflict with the kick and the sub. So let's initially set this up. So on the bass bus, I'm going to right click, sidechain to this channel, send it 100% to the channel. Then we can use this volume controller to control how much of the delay we hear. So that's starting to get there, but it does sound a bit muddy, doesn't it? So let's use the cutoff to remove some of those low end. I think even on this first bass line, we may need to go back to that because I think there's still a little bit too much low mid on there, which is causing this kind of resonancy kind of frequency. But for the time being, let's just see how it is by taking some of that low end off of the delay. And that's cleared it up quite a bit. Yeah, that's sounding a lot nicer. And let's go ahead and add an LFO tool, so some sidechain onto it. But I'm just going to bring down the volume very slightly. So we only have about 80% of the sidechain activating on the sound. And this way, it's just going to help it bounce with the sidechain, but we're also not the full sidechain amount. That's sounding nice now, and as we can hear, we're using this bass delay to just fill in the gaps. I'll turn it off and you'll hear how static it sounds. Now back on. It's sounding a lot more kind of gelled in with the rest of the track. So I'm just going to turn that back off. Let's just bring down the bass line just a tiny bit more. That's sounding a bit better. Now, let's go one step further. Let's improve this bass line even more. So we've got it all set up and linked to the bass bus, and on the bass bus I'm going to put a compressor on. Now, for the sake of the course, we should be using the FL Studio native plugins. I'm going to be using those as much as possible. It does limit the course just slightly in terms of the way that I produce and what I can kind of show you, as there's a lot of kind of third-party plugins that I use, but they're very expensive and they may not be kind of suitable for the kind of more beginner or intermediate kind of guys and gals, and you know, I want to make sure that this is as accessible as possible to everyone. So we're going to be using this, which is a free compressor. It's really nice. It's by Tokyo Dawn Labs, called the Molotok, I believe it's pronounced, and it's just a really simple but nice compressor that is better than the FL one. I'm really not a fan of it. So as I said in the previous episodes, kind of what are we doing, what are we trying to achieve by putting this compressor on? Well, I just want to kind of gel this whole sound together and make sure that the peaks are just a little bit more controlled, so when we do get to where the bassline changes key, that there aren't too many peaks that are kind of going too loud, and the softer parts can come up a little bit. It's also just going to help kind of, so yeah, bring these peaks down on the higher octaves and gel them more with the lower octaves. So we're going to use a pretty quick release because we want it to kind of bounce with the track, and about a 10 millisecond attack should be fine. We've got a 4:1 ratio, and then let's just go ahead and pull back on the threshold. So we got about a 2 dB of compression there, just a very soft amount, and I'll just bypass the compressor so we can hear exactly how it sounds. So to my ears, that's really just helping it kind of gel just that slightly. It kind of pushes it that little bit further back. Some of these top octave notes that I was saying are kind of screechy or kind of peaky. So this compressor is just helping to kind of bring those back down and leveling off the sound of the kick and of the bass line. So next step, let's go ahead and just add on a low cut, because I feel like there's now quite a bit of mid bass, low mid that is kind of still hanging over there, which could be from this bass line one. But let's just use let's just use an EQ. And what I quite like to do to kind of measure how much you want to keep in of your low mid, I like to do a low cut and then just sweep up and down to find that kind of sweet spot. Let's just make this nice and big. And then I'm going to press play and I'm just going to sweep up and down until I find the point where I'm cutting off enough low end that it is allowing the room for the kick and the sub to come through very cleanly, but not losing the weight of the bass line. That's what you don't want to do. You don't want to cut too much, so then all of a sudden all of that weight that we added in with the EQs on the channels, and then we've just removed that. So let's just press play and go through that. So that little change has just helped quite nicely. It's just cleaning up that low end just that little bit more. So as you can see, these just tiny small changes over a long kind of process are what making the difference. We're not doing any sort of kind of harsh cuts or boost or anything like that. We're doing lots of small changes over a longer process, giving us a more smooth kind of outcome. So the bass line sounded pretty cool. I'm just going to show you one more technique that you can do, and we can add some nice kind of distortion to the mid bass. Now you do have to be careful. This is why I wanted to add the cut afterwards, because this will can change the sound of your mid bass quite a lot. And unfortunately, with this built-in FL distortion plugin, we don't have like a dry wet knob, so we've only got the on or off. So we do need to be quite careful. So I'm going to pull back on the post gain quite a bit. And I'm not going to touch the preamp or the pre-band. I'm going to leave the amount of distortion as standard. I'm not going to try and dial any in, or maybe we can try it. But let's just see how it sounds adding that in. So we can hear it's crunching it up a little bit. Now the color knob here is kind of like the frequency band. So I'm going to pull this up to the right. So the higher to the right, the more kind of high end it's going to be focusing on. So actually, let's set it back to default, and then we'll move it. So you can hear as I was sweeping it there, you've got that kind of resonant-y kind of frequency, which is the area that's being affected. So I'll just turn that off and turn it back on so you can hear. So as you can hear, it is adding quite a nice amount of high end to it, but it's giving it a bit of a crunch, but maybe just too much high end. So we can use this post filter now just to bring some of that high end back down, but we're still keeping some of that nice mid-range crunch. So that's sounding a bit nicer. So let's do the comparison. So we'll start with it on, and then I'll turn it off. So there is quite a big difference, and realistically then it's up to you to decide which one you like better. I think let's pull back on the post filter just a little bit, because I do quite like that high end coming through. And I'm just going to leave it at that. It's up to you if you want to kind of use that yourself. You do have to be very careful that you don't over kind of kill or oversaturate your mid bass. I mean, maybe you could try putting it on an individual bass if you wanted one of them to be really distorted, but for the time being I'm just going to leave it the way it is. So now that we've got that on there, let's go back to the mid bass bus, and I'm going to pull the volume all the way down, and then I'm just going to press play, and I'm going to bring that volume back up now that we've added everything in. I'm going to add on the side chain to the actual bass bus itself so we get that nice pump, and let's bring that all back in to match the kick and the sub. that sounding really nice. And that was a very easy way of doing it as well. You know, not a lot going on, but just some nice EQing and some bit of a compression goes a long way to kind of help these tools sit together nicely. So we're going to do one final step before we call it there. We want to gel all of this together. So in the same way that we gelled all of our mid bass lines together with using the compressor, we want to now gel our sub, our mid bass, and our kick. So I'm just going to route all of these to a single channel, and we call this the kick and bass bus. Let's go ahead and add our compressor, and now I can control all of this with the one channel. And we can add like effects on there and with some filters and things. So we're going to add a compressor, and we're going to do the exact same thing. We want a very fast release and a medium to slow attack. We want the transients of the kick drum to still come through, but when the compressor acts, we don't want it to kind of compress too much, so it reduces the transients, and we want it to still be acting on our mid bass and our sub. We're going to keep it as a 4:1 ratio. And we may change the attack and release, but let's just pull back on the threshold. And what we're looking for here is exactly the same as the mid bass. We want to control any of those peaks. We want to kind of pull down the top ends of the higher parts and the louder parts of the kicks, the bass, and the sub, which is going to make the sound a little bit less because obviously we're reducing the dynamic range, but afterwards we're going to kind of bring that back. So let's just press play and pull back on the threshold. If you can hear that now, we are getting into the territory where it's distorting the low end of the kick drum because that's the loudest part. It's really coming through and it's being distorted far too much. So we've just gone too far there. So about there sounding good. I can really only get away with about 1 dB of compression with this type of compressor. This is kind of one of the reasons why I use a lot of third-party stuff, these expensive kind of analog emulations that allow you to get away with a lot more compression. I've got a course here on Sonic Academy which goes over all of that. It was the last course I did quite a few years ago. It was a how to make uplifting trance. So have a look at that if you're interested. Go through all of those techniques. But for this course, we want to stick and make it as simple as possible whilst getting the best outcome. And so using this free compressor is the best way to do that. So you might have been able to hear when I was clicking to do the bypass, you could really hear the difference. It's making it the kick drum kind of softer on the top end, and the low end is reducing some of those low end frequencies, but it's allowing some of that mid range to come through. It's adding a little bit of character from this actual compressor itself. So I'll just play it once again. So I'll start with it on and then turn it off. So it's just helping to compress that kick down a little bit and allowing the mid bass to come through as well as the sub. So even now that we've compressed it just that slight amount, let's just go ahead and we can just actually now just add some of that low end back in just to warm that low end up a little bit more. We've already done the kind of boosts on the kick and the sub. We don't want to go overboard. We just want to do a tiny couple of boosts here and there. Very small amount. And now if you turn that off and back on again so we can hear the difference, or let's start with it on. making quite a big difference, considering we've only put on 1.6 dB of boost in the low and some of the mids, really making such a difference. So now I'll toggle both of those at the same time so we can hear the difference between how it is compressed and EQ'd and beforehand. So this is with everything on. So that is making quite a big difference there. We're hearing a lot of that nice low ends come out more. It's sounding a lot fuller. It's sounding a lot nicer. There's more attack to it. It's just overall sounding just that little bit more in your face. And that's exactly what this compressor and this EQ is doing. Very small amounts, again, but over a longer period of time, a longer chain, it's making a big, big difference. So that's pretty much it for the kick and the bass. Next episode, we're going to have a look at the percussion and start getting that going, and the kind of vibe that we're looking for, and in comparison to the demo tracks and reference tracks. Great, I'll see you then. Thanks, and bye-bye.